It is indeed a great privilege for me to introduce today's distinguished keynote speaker, Dr. Manju Jaidka, a name that resonates deeply within the fields of American literary studies, Indian writing in English, diasporic literature, and creative writing, both nationally and internationally. Dr. Manju Jaidka is a former professor and chairperson of the Department of English, Panjab University, Chandigarh. Most recently, she served as the Director of Humanities at SRM University, Delhi, NCR, and earlier as Dean, Faculty of Liberal Arts and Ancient Indian Wisdom at Shulini University, Himachal Pradesh. With an extraordinary academic career spanning around 5 decades, she has contributed immensely as a teacher, scholar, administrator, researcher, and creative writer. Professor Jaidka holds a PhD in English literature and postgraduate degrees in both English and history. Her academic journey is marked by prestigious international fellowships, including the Fulbright Postdoctoral Research Fellowship at Harvard and Yale Universities, Rockefeller Fellowships in the USA and Italy, and visiting academic appointments at globally renowned institutions such as Oxford University, New York University, University of Illinois, and Concordia University, Canada. Professor Jaidka's scholarly excellence is reflected in her vast production of work, over 25 books encompassing literary criticism, encyclopedias, novels, poetry, short stories, and edited volumes. Her most recent academic contributions include the Encyclopedic Dictionary of Diasporic Indian English Writing, published by Springer, and the Routledge Encyclopedia of Indian Writing in English, which stand as landmark references in contemporary literary studies. Equally remarkable is her creative writing. She's an award winning novelist and poet honored by the Chandigarh Sahitya Academy for Best Novel, Best Poetry Collection, and for Lifetime Achievement. Her writing seamlessly bridges academic rigor with creative imagination, making her both authoritative and deeply humane. Beyond teaching and writing, Professor Jaidka has held several important leadership roles, most notably as chairperson of the Chandigarh Sahitya Academy, executive director of the International American Studies Association, and as a NAC peer team assessor, contributing significantly to academic quality assurance across Indian higher educational institutions. A sought after keynote and plenary speaker, she has delivered speeches across Asia, North America, and the UK, engaging with themes such as literature and memory, women's writing, diaspora studies, ecology, creative writing, and interdisciplinary humanities. What truly distinguishes Professor Manju Jaidka is her ability to ideally combine scholarship with creativity, tradition with modernity, and local concerns with global perspectives. She's a teacher who inspires, a scholar who challenges, a writer who enriches, and an academic leader who mentors generations of students and researchers. Today, we are truly fortunate to have with us an eminent scholar whose life and work exemplify intellectual depth, global engagement, and a profound commitment to literature and education. On behalf of the PG Department of English, CTTE College for Women, I extend a warm and enthusiastic welcome to our esteemed keynote speaker, Dr. Manju Jaidka. May I request you, Madam, to deliver the keynote address.
Thank you, Madam. That was really overwhelming. And I don't know what to say, but you have been very generous in your introduction, and it was a very long introduction. Thank you very much for the same. And I'm also grateful that you asked me to be a part of your conference, because I haven't had too much of interaction with Chennai academics, even though I've heard so much about them, and particularly Dr. C.T. Indra, who is quite a legend. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to hearing her today. But thank you once again. And I'm happy to give my views on contemporary Indian writing in English. The title that I've given to my presentation is Contemporaneity and Antiquity in Indian English Writing. Contemporaneity and Antiquity in Indian English Writing. Tradition and contemporaneity in literature. This is a subject as old as literary history, and at the same time as fresh as the latest buzz in academic circles. It forms the bedrock of all approaches to literature. For every emerging writer and every newly minted text is assessed by the same yardsticks, with a slight variation here and there. Even seemingly radical literary endeavors are scrutinized with reference to their predecessors and with the probable impact they are likely to have on literary history, looking back and moving forward at the same time, full of echoes of past literary achievements and anticipations of that which will follow. In this sense, a conference that interrogates tradition and embraces contemporaneity in Indian literatures in English will resonate with all literature aficionados, especially those who are immersed in literatures produced in India. At the same time, when we speak of our writers, we need to guard against the surge of national pride that manifests itself in uncritical applause and celebration. Instead of indulging in mere hero worship, let us engage in a critical, analytical, and fair assessment of what our writers are doing, now, and how they need to be studied. Not like untouchable icons whose golden words are to be worshipped without any doubt, but as fellow human beings who hold up a mirror to the world in which we live, highlighting our checkered lives, warts and all. So, tradition and contemporaneity is the crux of our discussion. And in this context, let us revisit 100 years ago to the year 1923, when T.S. Eliot published his essay on James Joyce's Ulysses. The oft-quoted lines are, I quote, "In using myth, in manipulating a continuous parallel between contemporaneity and antiquity, Mr. Joyce is pursuing a method which others must pursue after him. It is simply a way of controlling, of ordering, of giving a shape and significance to the immense panorama of futility and anarchy, which is contemporary history. Instead of narrative method, we may now use the mythical method," unquote. Looking further back at the 1917 essay, Tradition and the Individual Talent, Eliot insists that poets must engage with the past as a living presence, integrating tradition into their work to participate in an ongoing artistic dialogue. Now, these two are well-known quotations from T.S. Eliot. Indian writing in English, as we are aware, owes its origin to our erstwhile colonial masters, and Eliot is undoubtedly the foremost theorist practitioner who has influenced Indian writing in English. It is therefore inevitable that one should begin a discussion on the subject with reference to his ideas. Suffice it to say that writers worth their salt do not discard tradition. They build on literary legacies they inherit, and they take them further with their original talent. Antiquity and contemporaneity thus go hand in hand. They are not oppositional, but part of a dynamic literary process which evolves with time, welcoming new voices and carrying echoes of the past. Tradition is reflected in myth, folklore, legends, and literary history. Contemporaneity is the fresh wind that blows through these ingredients, making literature acceptable to newer generations of readers and scholars. Even if we choose to adopt a die-hard post-colonial position and reject T.S. Eliot and his theories, there is no escaping the fact that he did have a profound influence on literatures in English and also on Indian writing in English. The present conference seeks to address questions of identity, place, language, issues that rise and fall repeatedly in literature, issues that writers from India have been addressing since the earliest published works in the English language to the most recent ones. Keeping in mind that the audience I speak to today is probably a mixed one, comprising teachers, scholars, as well as students of literature who are still tentatively exploring the field. Before I proceed further, I would like to present in a nutshell the generally accepted meaning and scope of what we refer to as Indian literatures in English. Your conference flyer does give an overview, but perhaps I can add a few more points. Let me begin with a question. What do we mean by Indian literatures in English? Note, it is literatures and not just literature. So we are referring not to a monolithic structure, but a multi-layered body that includes creative writing in its various genres, diasporic writing, and translations from regional languages into English. That was very nicely presented in the concept note. Another question, what contributes to the Indianness of these literatures? Is it the sensibility they contain, or the environment, or the culture, the ethos, the rootedness in Indian soil, the stories handed down from the ages, or simply a sum total of all these? For the sake of convenience, let us take a broad definition that we are dealing with literatures by authors of Indian origin, literatures that are available in English. At this point, I would like to clearly state my epistemological standpoint. Although Madam has given a very nice introduction to my background, let me repeat, I've been in the field for more than 50 years as a teacher, researcher, critic, and literary historian, and now more of a creative writer and freelance literary critic, moving in and out of fields that grab my fancy. I like to focus on literary texts rather than theoretical jargon, which, if unguarded, invariably tends to obfuscate or distort the literary merits of a text. Now, in these 5 decades of active academic endeavor, I have reached a stage when I no longer feel dictated to or fettered by critical theories. When you read and absorb literature that is produced over a broad canvas, you discover new critical frameworks that emerge from the text. This has been my personal experience, and this, in my opinion, is the best way to immerse oneself in literature. And today I will touch upon a few thoughts that may be kept in mind when we speak of how Indian writing in English today endeavors to embrace the old and the new, the past and the present, then and now, looking forward to times that will be. A historical survey would begin with the stalwarts, the big three, Mulk Rajanand, Raja Rao, and R.K. Narayan. The succeeding generations coming down to the contemporary times would include Shashi Deshpande, Salman Rushdie, Aravind Adiga, Geeta Hariharan, Arundhati Roy, and many others across the genres. These, among others, are frequently cited and anthologized, but no less talented, no less prolific are others who dot the terrain of Indian writing in English. We also have translations into English that make Indian literatures accessible on the global platform. These and the writings of burgeoning categories of diasporic writers who follow in the footsteps of Anita Desai and Bharati Mukherjee ensure that readers all over the world have access to literatures that emerge from India. Among the various concerns of our writers, the most important has been socio-cultural. This is an umbrella theme of sorts. The literature that is produced is like a mirror, reflecting the myriad shades of lived experience in India, bridging the present and the past, looking forward to a newer tomorrow which may or may not be better than today. We see a lot of narratorial experimentation in Indian writing in English, whether it is with Salman Rushdie, Shashi Tharoor, or Arundhati Roy. Experiments, you will agree, are conducted when one is at ease with the material that is being handled. In this case, the language and the subject. The English language is no longer an alien tongue. It is a tool that we have appropriated, mastered to some extent, and adapted to our current needs. There is no reason for us to feel apologetic about using English. It is the language that opens a window to the wide world outside, and it is mainly through this medium that we connect with the international sphere, showcasing our perspective proudly, creating a place for ourselves in the global arena. One may argue that the English language is not accessible to all, but in the present scenario, with the internet and social media at our disposal, it has been seen that more and more people are getting familiar with the language and can use it with ease. The world seems to be getting flatter day by day, as Thomas Friedman predicted some decades ago. So there is no denying that Indian writing in English has found a place for itself internationally. There was a time when it was at the butt end of jokes, when scholars did not take it seriously, and it was considered to be a parasitic activity. So when did we gain respectability? With Salman Rushdie getting the Booker, perhaps, and then with Arundhati Roy. Sadly, we need the validation of the Western world to have faith in our own writers. And sadly, when Rushdie published the first anthology of Indian writing in English, the vintage anthology, if you remember that, most of the writers he included were not the Desi ones. They were those who had relocated to foreign shores, had a platform for being launched and garnering the approval of their foreign colleagues. And this still happens to some extent, although we have moved on. Indian writing in English is a burgeoning field now. We have prolific writers in India and across the world. They are recognized, they are being awarded, and their influence is acknowledged by upcoming writers, students, and scholars. And this is what I discovered when I was compiling the two encyclopedias that were mentioned a time ago, the Routledge Encyclopedia of Indian Writing in English and the Springer Encyclopedic Dictionary of Diasporic English Writing. So combining the old and the new, our writers have found a foothold in world literatures. Most of the Indian writers in English who are quoted and anthologized happen to be novelists. But there is a lot of literature being produced in the form of poetry and drama too. We are familiar with Mahesh Dattani and Kamla Das, to mention just two writers working in these genres. There is also a lot of literature being produced in English for screenplays, the cinema, the TV and OTT platforms. All this comes under the rubric of Indian writing in English and is a part of the literary terrain of India. Coming to the central focus of the conference, that is, how do our writers negotiate tradition with contemporaneity? We need to remember that tradition involves not simply rituals and other memorabilia from the past. It also includes history that is political, social, cultural, and personal. This situates, so to speak, a work in a particular time and space. This is where the roots of a text lie. And roots are important because they ground a voice or a text in a particular chronotopic specificity, chronotopic, time and space. At the same time, a literary text has wings that take it far above the native ground, making it relevant to people, time, and places far beyond its confines. As Walter Benjamin explained in his essay on the storyteller, I quote, All great storytellers have in common the freedom with which they move up and down the rungs of their experience as on a ladder extending downwards to the interior of the earth and disappearing into the clouds is the image for a collective experience which even the deepest shock of every individual experience death constitutes no impediment or barrier. So the best of literature has these roots and wings, this blend of tradition and innovation. Indian writing in English is no exception. Returning to a statement I made a little while ago that among the various concerns of our writers, the most important has been socio-cultural. I wish to highlight the has been socio-cultural and point out that in present times, we may discern a shift of focus in Indian writing in English. True, we still have social concerns like the woman question, for instance, or feminism, or gender issues, or corruption in society, the oppression of Dalits, emerging India, the seedy underbelly of society, violence and gore and power politics in personal and public spheres. But increasingly, there has been a marked tendency to return to our ancient past, our epics, our classics, and the writers of old who have not received adequate critical attention. One may attribute it partly to the resurgence of nationalist pride in the current political scenario and the desire to assert a specific identity. Whatever the reason, we see a lot of focus on religious mythology, revisionist attempt to retell the Ramayana or the Mahabharata from the point of view of a marginalized character or from a perspective different from the traditional. Even gods become characters in fiction. This seems to be a popular trend today, and almost every other writer, every other wannabe writer seems keen on jumping onto this bandwagon. So does it seem as though I'm running down this trend? Not really. I'm just surprised at the deluge that seems to be gathering momentum and wonder how long this fad will last. Yes, tradition is here, and there is some contemporaneity too, as it is a revisioning and reinterpretation of older stories. But the subject becomes a marketable commodity in the present context. But a repetition of similar patterns can often outlive its appeal. Repetitions happen, and a popular theme is sometimes done to death, as it were, until a new crop of writers comes forward with another fad. Repetitions. The idea takes us back to popular motifs and patterns that are repeatedly used in literature. Some perennial themes that captivate the human imagination and ensure that a text remains alive, particularly themes that relate to love, romance, birth, death, sorrow, and other profound human experiences. These human experiences are presented through story patterns that reach out to the reader and remain evergreen. As Northrop Frye, in his theory on archetypes of literature, explained, certain tropes and motifs recur in literature. Walter Benjamin also sees narrative as the art of repeating stories. Repetition is thus a part of storytelling, but repetition needs to go hand in hand with some novelty, some originality, some individual talent, or else it will not stand the test of time. Chick-lit literature, for instance, chick-lit may come and go. Young adult literature may have a temporary sway, but in literary history, will these genres make a mark? That is another question. Briefly, I would like to touch upon Indian writing in English and the Anthropocene. We are living in an era when literature is being written under the dominant influence of climate and the environment. We cannot escape it. But although the term Anthropocene may be new, the concerns with climate change, environment, and landscape are not. In earlier writers, also we have a return to nature movement. Now the concern wears a different garb, as the pressures on contemporary writers are different. Literature from the margins, tribal literature, and the use of the world of nature, all this figures in literature much more than before, keeping in mind issues like global warming, deforestation, and the erosion of green areas in the name of development. Some other factors influence Indian writing in English today. The importance of social media cannot be ignored, nor can we dismiss market forces and visibility, market forces. The political climate too governs to a large extent the kind of literature that is being produced, which makes me ponder upon the age-old question, should art be for art's sake? Or should literature have an agenda? We hate literature that has a design on us, don't we? However, everything that a writer produces carries a message which must be taken into account. It is the writer's worldview that is being presented, along with some lessons learned and some tacit advice for readers. Much of the writing stems from experience, memory, and autobiography. In Indian writing too, yes. Some important issues govern Indian writing in English. As one established writer lamented, everyone wants to be a writer, but they don't wish to read. Everyone wants to be a writer, but they don't wish to read. This happens, I've seen it happening. A major issue is the commercialization of creativity, treating creativity as a market produce, quantifying it, using artificial methods to pump up the sales of a book, and manipulating popularity and awards. This happens. Genuine works of literature have nothing to fear because their worth will be time-tested. But there are those who spring up overnight and become bestsellers by virtue of these marketing strategies, and those who sell their talent to popular cinema that caters to the masses. I am not naming Chetan Bhagat. While it is true that popular and elitist literature or serious literature may overlap, keeping in view that the commercial potential of creative writing runs the risk of undermining the literary quality of a text, which is produced solely or for the masses. So sometimes they overlap, and sometimes a text is written solely for the market, for the masses. When an item is produced for the masses, how much intrinsic value would it have? Would it be a classic? Or would it be one of those ephemeral texts that have a topical relevance but cannot stand much scrutiny and disappear from the scene when the initial hype wears out? If we look at the OTT platforms, films and serials that are top grossers today, it appears that what sells today is sex, sleaze, and gore. Writers today also have to grapple with the politics of publication. How to find a publisher if you're not one of those writers who have made it. If you have no godfathers, no political connections, nothing but your inner urge and talent to write. It is not easy. It's not easy finding a publisher. And I personally had the experience of not finding a publisher when I wanted to publish a book on how to manage disability. How to manage disability. I just could not find a publisher because who wants to publish a book on disability when there is so much of, violence and gore and sex and sleaze and young literature, young adult literature and chick lit going around. So that was a problem I faced until I put it on Kindle and I self-published it. And then once it was self-published, then it found its own life and went across international borders. I was happy for that. Now, there is also the politics of canonization. How do certain books become respected texts while others fade away into oblivion? Again, there is power politics at work. I will not go into that. And there is the politics of translation. The best works may not get translated into English, but a mediocre talent with the right kind of friends and connections may be able to get her work translated, and it may reach a wider audience. Yes, it happens. And we have been talking about Heart Lamp by Bhanu Mushtaq. It has been validated by a foreign yardstick, and that is why we are tom-tomming it. That is why we are giving it so much importance. But look at the title, Heart Lamp. Heart Lamp, what does it mean? But because it's got the Booker, everyone says, oh yes, it's fine. But if you look at the title, it's a very opaque title. I'm sure a better construction, a better title would have been available, like The Flame in the Heart or The Lamp in the Heart or something like that. But Heart Lamp is what has been accepted and awarded by a Western panel of assessors. And so we also accept it and we say, oh yes, it is the greatest. So let us be a little critical. Let us not just accept what we are handed down by the Western world. Now, okay, so what happens in the translation? Is it worth the effort or not? The judges are sometimes carefully chosen, as are the translators, and the work travels across geographical boundaries, finding itself in international readership. Visibility is thus ensured. It is also ensured through literature festivals, and we have no dearth of them now in our country. But most of these literature festivals now seem to have become, circuses, where the same performers are flattered and feted. After a while, that too becomes a yawn, as it takes on the appearance of more of a reunion of old buddies, more of a glitzy, glamorous collection of celebrities than a serious gathering. I do not wish to sound dismal, for despite all politics, Indian writing in English is a flourishing field and has a bright future. We, as teachers, scholars, and critics, can do a bit to ensure some kind of quality control that the literature that is produced, disseminated, translated, and popularized should be such that we can legitimately feel proud of. It should have its intrinsic worth and enough strength to travel down the ages on its own merit. Literature produced in India needs to be a bridge between our land and the outside world. Our land and the outside world. We believe in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, don't we? Human experience across borders of time and space. And this human experience is very much the same. There is a connectivity between our literature and theirs. Our literature and theirs that we need to explore so that differences that lead to hostility are bridged. The idea of Ubuntu works well too. Indian writing is a part of world literature, and world literature can promote the cause of better international understanding, serve as a link between national literatures, and help in the exchange of ideal values. It can be an intellectual barter system, as Goethe once said. In 1827, he said, the great creations of world literature, while rooted in the soil of a single person, reach upward into the sphere common to all men. There is this element of transculturality. Transculturality, which we see in much of literature that is produced today. I'll give you just one example. Vikas Swaroop's Q&A that focuses on the slums of Mumbai. This book is inspired by Kaun Banega Karodpati. And Kaun Banega Karodpati is a ripoff from its Western counterpart, the UK reality game show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Later, this is made into a film, Slumdog Millionaire by Danny Boyle. So, is the text in Indian or Western? Clearly, it has cut across borders and resists any specific label. So keeping in view that what we produce will become part of world literature and will go down to posterity, we, readers, writers, teachers of Indian writing in English, need to develop a sense of responsibility. We need to resist trend worship. We need to practice discrimination, not reverence. We need to maintain an equilibrium between praise and critical analysis. Much of Indian writing in English exists outside the glare of festivals, prizes, and social media. It is here that tradition often survives most stubbornly. Contemporaneity is not to be confused with popularity. Celebrated writers do not always carry tradition forward. Often it is sustained by teachers, translators, small press poets, and relatively unknown writers. And this is what I realized when I was working on those encyclopedias. It dawned on me that many serious writers remain unread, unreviewed, uncategorized. And these are the writers to look out for, to translate, to support. Tradition and contemporaneity thus go hand in hand. What exactly is at stake if this balance is lost? Unless a careful balance is maintained between them, one may overshadow the other. They are like two powerful stallions drawing a chariot, and they need to be in harmony, or the consequences may be disastrous. Are we not reminded of the Icarus pattern? Icarus, you know Icarus? He was told if you go too close to the sun, those beautiful wings will melt and you will fall into the sea and drown. In our own legends, we have an Indian counterpart to the story, Sampati and Jatayu. The harsh rays of the sun burnt Sampati, who tried to shield his brother Jatayu. So there is a similarity in the stories, but also a difference. The point that I'm stressing is that certain stories will continue to be repeated over and over again, and a balance between the past and the present is needed for sustainability in all our efforts in order to forge ahead. Like William Blake's Bard, the writer sees past, present, and future. He knows that time is a river that will keep flowing, and our stories will flow with the current as they move down the stream, forever changing and forever new. Finally, if tradition and contemporaneity are best imagined not as opposites, but as a movement, we can think of them as an intertwining, interwoven, unstoppable movement that shapes the evolving literary terrain. Like a river that comes down from the hills, flows to the valleys and plains towards the seashore. It does not move backward. And yet, when we think of the river, we visualize it in its entirety, from the earliest point of origin right down to the delta, the final destination where it merges into the sea. We, as scholars and students, need to recognize this ever-flowing river. I quote with a few lines taken from a poem I wrote a couple of years ago on the river. The river speaks. Would you like to join my endless flow? Dance with me, be a part of my show. Move with me, advancing, exploring towards our final destination. We will journey on, discovering new shores, new sands, new lands, new climes and cities, and infinitely more. Accept the change, embrace the unknown, just keep on going, moving on and on. Let us go, let us flow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for an enlightening and inspiring keynote address. We had the opportunity to listen to a voice shaped by decades of thought, experience, and engagement with literature and life. You precisely trace the evolution of Indian English literature, highlighting its cultural depth, diversity, contemporary relevance, and narrative experimentations. The way you connected literary texts with social realities and global perspectives made the session both engaging and intellectually enriching. Your speech added immense value and intellectual depth to the conference, madam. Thank you once again for sharing your valuable time and knowledge with us.
Thank you so much. I would welcome any questions or comments if there are any, if that is part of your program. Otherwise, it's fine. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. The students will be asking questions now, ma'am. Just a minute.
Madam, Dr. C.T. Indra has also joined. She's been listening to your address too.
That's so kind. I'm so honored.
Yeah. Yes, questions, please.
I find that usually students are a little shy asking questions.
Manju, good morning. Indra here.
Good morning, madam. Good morning, madam. I'm so sorry.
Colleagues.
In all my career, I have not had the chance to interact with you, but you're quite a legend. And yesterday, when I was mentioning to Dr. Emil Reiner that you would be speaking, he said, "Oh, I want to see her." I sent the link to him, but he said he could not log in for some reason. I don't know why. But in any case, he remembers you fondly, Dr. Emil Reiner.
Where is he? He's still in Chandigarh? Or
He's in Chandigarh. He's in Chandigarh.
Oh, I love him. Great respect.
Oh, yes. He's still active, bright, and energetic as ever.
Your department has produced great minds. We're all enlightened to talk.
That's very kind, madam. My only regret is that I have not interacted with you.
Oh,
It's just chance.
No, you talked about popularity and contemporaneity. We were contemporary, but we were not popular, so we couldn't get it.
Oh, it is just chance. Sometimes it is just chance that you don't interact with such.
Who brought us here together on this platform. I'm so happy. I listened.
Yes, I'm so glad. Thank you so much.
I listened from the beginning. Unfortunately, there was some technical ineptitude, so I couldn't show you that I'm here.
Okay. But thank you. So, if the students are feeling
yes, ma'am. No. Students are ready, ma'am. They are waiting for your.
Okay.
Hi, ma'am.
Yes.
Miss Sylvania has a question for you, ma'am.
Yes, Sylvania, waiting.
Yes, ma'am. I'm very delighted to have you. And my question is, you have said that the traditional and the contemporary goes hand in hand, no?
Mm-hmm.
So I have, but when I write personally, sometimes I don't bring the traditional and contemporary things that goes together. Because often I think about the contemporary, out of my point of view, contemporary is different, the traditions is different. Can I have that an explanation, ma'am?
You see, what happens is when you are writing in the present, Sylvania, when you're writing in the present, you're not writing just in the present, but what you are writing is the sum total of whatever you've experienced in the past. Whatever you have been groomed in, right? And I don't know how old you are, but as you get older, your horizons will expand. And as your horizons expand, they will all go into your writing. So your writing cannot really be isolated. It is influenced by the experiences that you go through, the people around you, what you have been taught, the way you have been groomed, your culture, everything goes into it.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, our principal, Dr. Sridevi, too, has a question for you. Her question is, what is the role of literature departments in canonizing a text?
The role of literature departments in canonizing a text, I have mentioned it in a sidelong manner. It's like this, you know, in your department, in your institution, you have a lot of people who are very much into the subject. And when they're into the subject, you know, they have a certain profile, they have a certain importance, they go places, they talk about certain works. So it's very important to get faculty that is strongly grounded in the subject and faculty which can promote and disseminate the right kind of ideas to the coming generation of scholars, right? And then there are these boards of studies, you know, the syllabus making, syllabus designing. In that also you can have a strong influence because you put in the text which you feel are good for the coming generations, for the students. So that is what canon building is all about. There was a time when all women were excluded from the canon because they were women. So only men, only works written by men were taught, read, studied. But now with enlightened people around, we have a lot of other subjects also coming in. Women writers, Dalit writers, marginalized writers, and other multi-ethnic voices which are studied. So the role of teachers, the role of professors, the role of these boards of studies and the syllabi making committees, that cannot be undermined. That we have a responsibility. We are all teachers, and I have been, and but there are still so many young people, so many people still in power. So you need to realize that you have this responsibility and give direction to the students that you are grooming. On the other hand, and also, you know, the conferences that you organize, the seminars that you organize, what is the theme that you are working on? What is it where the research that you are guiding? All that is important. For instance, some time back, I was asked to speak on dystopic literature. And dystopic literature, well, I ran it down completely. I said, okay, dystopia is something we see all around us, but we need to immerse our students in dystopic literature, in violence, in bloodshed, and in all that kind of negativity. We see so much of it happening around us. Why can't we turn their attention to something that is positive? You know, because if you keep on talking about, if you keep on reading this kind of stuff, it becomes a part of your psyche. It gets ingrained in you. That is what I feel. So it's better to disseminate ideas that lift a person, ideas that promote positivity. So the role of teachers, students, scholars cannot be denied. And these young students that I can see on the screen, these young students, well, they also can do this because they have younger siblings, they have younger cousins. So share your books with them. Share books which carry certain positive messages to them. I would suggest something like the Panchtantra, the Nali Rama, or, you know, these folk tales that teach you how to live life the best way. I would suggest that you take on this responsibility seriously. Madam Principal, I hope that answers your question.
We have one more question from a participant, ma'am.
Yes.
Good day, ma'am. To what extent can the works of new Indian writers be seen as redefining India in 20th century?
Your voice is echoing, my dear. Say it again slowly.
To what extent can the works of new Indian writers be seen as redefining Indian in 21st century?
Let me repeat what you said. To what extent can the works of new Indian writers be treated as what?
Ma'am, she's repeating it. Just a minute.
To what extent can the works of new Indian writers be seen as redefining Indianness in 21st century?
Okay, redefining Indians in the 21st century. See, there is a lot of writing going on. There's a lot of writing going on, and you have this new crop of writers coming up, you know, well, they are very enthusiastic. They all want to be writers, but as I said, they have not read too much. And if you have not read too much, your power of expression is limited, your vocabulary is limited, your ideas are limited, and plus you are a youngster. I'm talking about the writers in 20s and 30s who write. Now, are they redefining literature? Well, they are making a buzz. They are making a buzz, but how long will that buzz continue? I do not know. And I can personally tell you of, groups of writers, groups. By groups, I mean 200, 300, 400, 500, even 600, 700 of young writers who form a group. They form a group, they read each other's books, they give them all 5 stars on Amazon, and, post it on social media. They do that. Now, I don't know if they're going to redefine Indian writing in English or not, but if you are a young teacher and you will grow into an important position these days, you have to use your judgment. You have to use your discrimination and see how good or bad they are. Some of them may be very good. We do keep having a lot of new, young, talented writers coming up. But most of them, excuse me, are rubbish. And even Booker, don't get dazzled by it. I remember some years ago, there was one book, a Booker Prize winner, that came to me for review. And honestly, it was one of the worst books that I have read. It was one of the worst books that I had read. And that guy had used, the kind of language that illiterate people use, putting in bad words, putting in slang, and all sorts of things, that it gets the Booker. So don't get dazzled by it. Use your own judgment, use your own buddhi, your common sense, and see whether there is some merit or not in the work, right? When we were working on the encyclopedias, there were so many people who wrote to me saying, I have published so many books and so on and so forth. I'm a poet, I'm awarded by so-and-so. But then I read just 2 or 3 poems by that person, and I saw that this man doesn't even know grammar. And there is something like poetic license. But when you use thee instead of thou, and when you say mine instead of thine, and when you make a lot of other mistakes which are clearly not part, which don't fit into the poetry, then I don't get convinced. So it's good to have your own opinion and not get swayed by others. But I understand your position. See, I have put in 50 years in this job, so I am on a different plane, but you will get swayed a little. Fine, listen to everybody, but try and see what is the worth of what you are reading. Okay?
Thank you, ma'am.
We have another question, ma'am.
Okay.
In what ways do new Indian voices address generational conflict between transition and modernity? In what ways do new Indian voices address generational conflict between transition and modernity?
You see, this struggle, this conflict between generations has always been there. And the new generation always thinks that, oh, the older generation knows nothing. But the older generation was also once a new generation, and they were also rebels in their own way. So this keeps on happening. And when the younger generation becomes the older generation, then they realize, yes, our parents are okay. They were fine. They were right in what they said, and they were right in what they did. Now, the upcoming generation, well, they have to make their own mistakes. They have to make their own mistakes. They have to learn their own way, and they have to make asses of themselves also. Because unless you make a fool of yourself a couple of times, you don't get wiser. So give them time, let them grow, and time will tell. History, literary history, will determine where exactly they stand. Did I answer your question, or is there something missing?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. The next question. Do you think the diasporic writers have a balance of tradition and contemporaneity than the Indian writers? Do you think the diasporic writers have a balance of tradition and
I got it.
contemporaneity than the Indian writers. What is your
I got
opinion
it.
about that?
I got it. You see, in the beginning, actually, diasporic writing is something that we have been hearing about since the 1980s, I think, roughly 1980s, 70s, 80s. It was Bharati Mukherjee who made it popular, and after that, there have been so many others. Even before Bharati Mukherjee, there were other writers, people like, once upon a time, there was this barber called, what was his name? Deen Muhammad. Deen Muhammad. He went around places cutting hair, shaving, and so on, and he wrote stories about his experiences. But let's not go that far. Let's talk about Bharati Mukherjee. Now, when Bharati Mukherjee was started writing, she would present India in a very exotic manner. And most of the diasporic writers at that time, in the 70s, 80s, and even to some extent in the 90s, they were presenting India in very exotic terms as a land which was, there were Maharajas, there were elephants, there were snake charmers, there was voodoo magic and things like that. And Bharati Mukherjee, when she was much lauded and she became famous, she came to India, and everybody said, we are very proud that, you have made India proud, and one of us has become so important. And she says, oh, I ain't Indian, I'm not Indian, I'm American. But all her stories are based in India, and the fame that she has got is courtesy India, right? So as somebody put it, Indianness is like a shawl that she wears when she feels like it, and when she wants, she can discard it. So there is an element of opportunism, mind you. In the early diasporic writers, there is this opportunism. They know that what the West wants, what the readers in the West want, is something like magic, something like voodoo, something exotic. And so they write about that, whether it is the mistress of spices or whether it is, something like magic realism or whatever. But now things are different. Now you don't find that kind of India. Or even if you have patches where you have that kind of India, you have a lot of these writers who are writing abroad, and there's so many of them. They go from India, they go abroad, they settle down there, and they write about their own experiences there. Second generation of diasporic Indians, third generation, they are very well adjusted in that climate, in that environment, and that kind of magic, voodoo, and that is not there. So there is, what they do is, I don't know what kind of tradition they have, which they combine with their present day affairs, but they do talk about their older generations, they talk about their ancestors, they talk about coming back, not so much as presenting India as an exotic land, but in more of a realistic manner.
Thank you for that excellent answer, ma'am. We have one more question, if that's okay with you.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm so glad your students are interested.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. How traditional forms like oral storytelling survive in the contemporary literary spaces? How traditional forms like oral storytelling survive in contemporary literary space?
All right. So what are the old forms of storytelling? Let's see, what are the old forms of storytelling? And if we go back, we have the Panchtantra, we have the Katha Sarit Sagar. And sadly, people do not talk about the Katha Sarit Sagar, whereas I love that text. I love that collection of stories. Now, what do you have out there? You have a story within a story, and you have, that element of orality coming in. Somebody is telling a story to somebody else, and you were taken back to the time when people used to gather under a tree in a village, and there used to be one storyteller telling you all that. All right. Now, how much of that survives today? Let us see. If you take somebody like Salman Rushdie, for instance, Salman Rushdie may be, he has his own quirky style of writing, but he does combine the past and the present, and he does bring in some storytellers. He does bring in some kind of tradition. If you take Shashi Tharoor, he takes one story and he presents different angles to it, different sides. I think he's such a talented writer. He is really one of the best that we have now. So he is also in his Great Indian novel, Great Indian Novel, and then later on in Riot, he is experimenting. And all these writers are aware of the tradition as such, the old tradition of storytelling, which still is very effective. And then we also have a lot of storytelling on the radio, and there are podcasts. I'm not very familiar with podcasts, so I won't go into that. But there is that traditional form of storytelling, which also takes on the performative form too, because we have in a big metro, for instance, I don't know if you have it in Chennai, but say in a big metro like Delhi NCR, where I'm located right now, we have a lot of these groups performing stories, going from place to place, performing stories for children. And they're very popular, they're doing very well. So in a way, we are continuing an older form of storytelling, but we are presenting it in different ways. You see, when you're writing, when you're printing, of course, there's not that kind of performance, but there's a different kind of performance. And I wish there would be more people writing plays so that they would be enacted. Now we have Mahesh Dattani, who's probably one of the best, but there are some others also, and we need to encourage them. So in your college, maybe you can have some creative writing competition and, encourage people to write. That's how they get interested in it. And that is how they start expressing their ideas freely. And at the same time, you must read, because unless you read, how can you be a good writer? And I must tell you that, for the last many years, we have been organizing a lot of talks by young writers, old writers, and so on. And there was this very young writer who felt she was the greatest gift that God had given to mankind, because her family had told her, oh, you are the best. So she came and she said, she was not even 20. She said, I have written about my life experiences. I said, excuse me, tell us about your life experiences. And what books have you read? She had not read anything. She had not read the classics. She was not familiar with any of the writers that we read about or we teach. But, well, she wanted to be a writer. So all this happens, and I'm sorry, I keep straying this way and that way, and I probably lose track of your question. But I must tell you, do you have undergraduates or postgraduates or PhDs in your college?
Postgraduate, UG and PG, ma'am, undergraduates.
Okay. Well, we've been running a society for the last almost 30 years, since 1997. And we have conferences every year, and we have conferences on different themes. And each conference has about 150, 200 scholars coming in. And the last one was we had one in Dibrugarh. Before that, we had one in Dharamshala. Then before that in Nepal. And the coming one we are going to have in Gujarat. And we have a different theme every time. So you encourage people to come forward with their ideas. And at the same time, you maintain some kind of a regimentation, some discipline, so that, they take it seriously. They don't come just for a certificate. They come actually present a paper, take part in the discussion, and that's how it should be. The next one we are going to have is, the title vaguely, tentatively, is Literature for Peace. Literature for Peace. And there's so much of rubbish about dystopic literature and, conflict and all that. I said, let's turn to peace. So how can we use literature for peace? So you can organize something like that. And if you have researchers or scholars who are interested, put them in touch with our society, and we'll be happy to include them.
It's such an honor to have you, ma'am. Thank you so much. And thank you for answering all the questions so elaborately and in such a manner that the students understood. Thank you so much, ma'am.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much. And send me the link when you post it.
Sure, ma'am. Sure.
And I will remain logged in until, as I told you, we are going to have a power shutdown today. So I will remain logged in as long as I can. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, my dear.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful conference.